Well, that moody melody is, as many of you know, from Bartok Concerto for Orchestra. It's an amazing piece. It has a tremendous amount of music in it. It's on a lot of auditions. If you're a person who's out there trying to get a job in the orchestra, you know that already. And I want to just take a look at it today as a musical statement and as a possible exercise, because it's very challenging in a lot of ways, because it's so precise, it's so plain, so simple. So let's just dive in and maybe I can give you a few ideas about how to think of this musically and how to practice it. So here we go. First thing I do is I'm looking for the life in the music. And to me, the life in the music comes from many different things. It comes from the qualities of the sounds. It comes from the line, of course. It comes from all the musical qualities, the articulation, the way things are pronounced is the way I like to think about that. It comes from the rhythmic activity, which in its most essential form is the feeling of pulse and the sense of what is the energy in the flow. So let's just take a little bit of look at the line and the energy of the flow. So right off the bat, in the beginning, you're starting with 4 16th notes. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So I'm going to make a suggestion to you as far as metronome practice. And of course there are a lot of techniques. I plan to do a video on playing with the metronome, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. So hopefully this will be helpful to some of you. So there we have a beat, a steady tempo. And a good place to start is, can you just play it evenly? Now for me, that way of practice is very, very helpful, because not only is it about the subdivision, the sense of the 16ths and the 8th notes moving through those long tones, which needs to be maintained continuously in your mind, in the feel of the rhythm. Any experienced player knows this, and they do it actually, most of us do it unconsciously because we've been doing it our whole lives. But the tonguing the articulation, it not only helps you physically feel, tonguing the subdivision, not only helps you physically feel what's going on, but it also helps you to hear the line. And I hope you noticed, I'm going to play a little bit of it again. I hope you noticed that I'm showing you where the line goes by very subtle dynamic changes through the articulation. Now this happens whether I'm just sustaining a note without articulating, or whether I have a whole string of 16th notes. So let me try and show it to you. It also helps you to sustain the notes the right length, because when you're playing this with other people, which we are, you want to be doing those releases at the same time, and that keeps you sustaining and going into the silence, which is really, really helpful. Now that wasn't a very good example, but I hope you can hear I'm actually bringing out the 16th notes more, and then I'm kind of taking my foot off the gas a little bit on the long tones. I'm still carrying them, I'm still sustaining them, but there are other more interesting things happening in the orchestra, and the interesting thing in my line is those moving things. Those moving 16th notes right at the beginning. Now we could get really deep into this and talk about the style of the articulation, how legato, how separated, and many, many other things. But I want to go kind of an opposite direction from articulation right now and just talk about, well, what's the shape? So I'm going to play it without any articulation. And I'm going to exaggerate the shape of the line in my mind. This is my interpretation. So you see how that feels totally different than the way it says to play it here. And I find working like that very valuable because it's like many of you probably know the proverb of the three blind men and an elephant. And of course there can be many more blind men than that, but for those of you who don't know, the proverb goes, one blind man takes a hold of the trunk and he says the elephant is like a great serpent. And another blind man stands by the side of the elephant and puts his hands out and feels the side of the elephant. And he says, no, the elephant is like a wall. And another blind man goes around the back and he happens to get a hold of the tail. And he says, no, the elephant is like a rope. And of course, they're only experiencing one part of the creature at a time. And that's exactly what we're doing when we're practicing music. It's like we have to walk around this and experience it from different angles. So that helps me. Playing it at different speeds helps me. Playing it at different dynamics helps. Playing it with a different kind of attitude. Now, to me, the attitude of this is kind of mysterioso. It's something is going to happen, and the energy is kind of gradually building up. It's kind of a dramatic tension that's taking place at this part of the piece, which is amazing. It's really genius, and I love it. I hope that you love it too. But there are a lot of technical problems that we need to get over before we can play this piece. Articulation I mentioned, but we're sustaining notes. How do we sound when we're sustaining notes? Are we using vibrato or not? See, these are all questions that need to be answered in your own musical imagination, in your work with other people in the section, and the rest of the orchestra, in the interpretation of the conductor. But the standard way of playing this is pretty plain. And for a lot of people, that's very difficult to just sustain a note without using vibrato to color the sound. I find that very difficult myself. So when I play it totally smooth like that, that gives me a long idea. It's one continuous idea. There's no break in it. And that keeps the air running correctly. It keeps my mind looking forward to what's happening next. And I'm playing the shape. I'm also playing the harmony. We're not talking about that right now, but I've mentioned it before. If you could hear this in context, it's so much more interesting because of the support, harmonic support, which is along with it. So playing with the recording, certainly listening to the recording and getting the sound of the harmony in your mind is going to be an essential thing to do. Okay, now something that people don't take into consideration too much, I'll mention one more thing. Like I'd say, there are many details and many challenges physically in playing this simple little tune. You start on an E and you end on an E. You're changing an octave. And without other people there to play with, without a pitch reference, which you have in the orchestra, if you're playing this by yourself for a recording or for an audition where you're just playing it by yourself, are the octaves in tune and are all the intervals in between in tune? So that's a meticulous kind of practice that everybody who's interested in playing in an orchestra needs to do. We need to get to that as how do we practice that later on. But just keeping the sound even between the registers and listening for pitch is going to be very helpful. If you use a drone on the E, that can be very helpful too. It's a great way to practice. I might demonstrate that at some point, although I have a feeling that many of you already do it. It's good if you can, what I would do is run it through my stereo system, through the speakers, and have that constant sound, which then I can relate to in terms of the accuracy of my pitch. The goal here is, can I Can I hear where I'm going to next? And can I keep that reference in my mind as I'm playing? The reference of the harmony and where I fit in the harmony, and the reference of that stability of the sound. Okay, I think that's plenty to work on for now. I'm going to do separate videos on different parts of the piece, because this piece has so much great music in it, and I know those of you who know the piece and are working on it possibly, preparing it, would want me to address some of the other spots in the piece. So we'll do that later on. Please join me again, and take a look at my channel if you have a few minutes, and just do some exploring and see if you can find anything useful for yourself there. Thanks for your attention. Now it's time to go practice. I'll see you later on. Have a great day. Bye-bye.